everyone, welcome to Timed Out. I was going to call you Lockie Ferguson.
I'll take it.
To be fair, no, you don't look at all alike. I'm going to go for take two. Hello everyone and welcome to Timed Out with sportingnews.com, our weekly whip around the world of cricket with me, Melinda Farrell, and Lachlan McKirdy. Lockie, lots going on. We're working out time zones. We're trying to work out when everything is on in the world. But most importantly, have you found a sound effect for the alarm this week?
Of course I have. I've managed to find some time in between looking at my atlas, getting all the time zones up, finding out where the dateline is. But no, I've also managed to squeeze in a nice little soundbite that we're going to have to wrap up each topic this week.
Okay, well, as always, we have 3 minutes to get in as much as we can about each of our topics this week. A lot to crack on with. First up, we have the Australian men over in the Caribbean. They've managed to get a warm-up game in at the start of this. Yeah, just with hurricanes blowing around. This T20 tour, the first match is the first of 10 T20s that Australia has in the lead up to the T20 World Cup later this year. And I don't know about you, I'm on the Dan Christian bandwagon. I have been for some time, Lockie, and he did do pretty well in that warm-up game, didn't he?
He certainly did. I think in that Australia 2 side, so obviously the two teams I think were split up into teams of 10. He top scored for Australia 2 in that first innings, 47. I think he finished off about 31 balls. So a really good solid innings from him there in the middle, in a position that Australia really needs to sort out. Because I think for the most part you can say their top order, once the World Cup comes around, is pretty settled. Their top bowlers are probably pretty settled. You've got a fair idea. But those positions 4, 5, 6, 7, they're really up for grabs, especially 6 and 7, I'd say. So if Dan Christian can continue this sort of form into the West Indies series, he's going to make a real claim for that position once the World Cup rolls around.
Yes, I hope so. It'd be such a great story. 38 years of age,
yes.
I'd love to see it. Come on, you know you would. What about some of the others? Look, a lot has been made about the fact that there are positions up for grabs on, possibly on this tour because 7 Australians have withdrawn after the IPL. Maybe a real sort of battle going on for the wicketkeeper position, isn't there?
I think there certainly is. I mean, it's obviously a trial game. You can't look too much into it. But if we are to sort of allow ourselves to dive in, Matt Wade and Josh Philippe were the two to take the gloves in the separate teams. And Alex Carey was kind of relegated to being just a fielder for, I think, the Australia 1 team. And that kind of meant that he is third in the pecking order, if you're looking at it at the moment, which kind of suggests that they've got a bit of faith in Josh Phillippe's wicket-keeping, which is something that maybe people weren't sure about. But I think if he can establish himself as that number 2 keeper, then that's a really positive sign for Josh Philippe and his place in the team moving forward.
Yeah, no, conditions, I mean, there were quite a lot of runs scored. Quite a few batters were able to clock some decent runs up. Bit trickier for the bowlers. Looks like the conditions are the sort where, according to Dan Christian, it was slower. There were cutters and slower balls having some effect, and it was taking some spin as well. So that's going to be good for Australia to have a look at a number of bowlers, I think, with their variations.
I think so too, and yeah, just good to see the likes of Mitch Marsh, Ashton Turner, Dan Christian and Moses Enriquez all sort of top scoring, and will give the selectors a bit of a selection headache once the likes of Glenn Maxwell and Marcus Stoinis return to the setup ahead of the World Cup later this year.
Assuming they do, of course.
Oh, what a ripper!
I agree, Richie. I really do agree.
I love the fact that you've become quite nostalgic in your selection.
I have to. No one matches Richie. No one can match him.
Okay, that's fair enough. We had Bill Laurie last week, Richie Bennett this week. You can find it a bit hard to top next week, and you know that your job always depends on it. So, bit of pressure.
I have set myself a high bar, haven't I?
Very high bar. Now, another interesting article that has made its way through the Courier Mail, John Buchanan, the former Australian coach, going into bat for Justin Langer. There have been a couple of reviews that have been held post the Australian men's summer, and a fair bit has been made about Justin Langer's coaching style and perhaps being a bit intense, micromanaging, not delegating to his assistants so much. The players have all spoken about it pretty openly and emphasised it wasn't just Justin Langer who was being reviewed, it was everybody. But this has been rumbling around, and John Buchanan is less than impressed with it, isn't he?
He really is, and I think it kind of speaks to the level in which the Australian cricket team is held, that any sort of little bits and pieces of pressure or something that comes out of the media, we automatically talk about, because that's, I guess, how much pressure is around this team, especially after kind of at least one summer where the results have not gone their way, and 2 out of the last 3 where they've been really disappointing. So naturally it's going to become a talking point. And when you listen to someone like John Buchanan speak about it, who has such incredible experience in coaching Australia, you're going to listen. And yeah, I found it, like you were saying, really interesting kind of how much he was coming into bat for Justin Langer, and kind of just saying, look, you need to come down hard on these players that are kind of showing that little bit of dissent or talking against the regime, I guess, in a certain way. And then also, I guess he had some strong comments about the players who have opted against touring to the West Indies and Bangladesh as well.
Yeah, he did. He was very strong about that, and suggesting that some players perhaps take it for granted playing for Australia, and that if they're prioritising playing for T20 franchises over international duties, that should not be looked upon kindly. I guess it's interesting talking about Dan Christian. I mean, you look at the sort of last few months when he was playing, what he's been through to get to this tour. He played in the Pakistan Super League, then he played in the Indian Premier League. Both of those called off. He went to the Maldives when he was locked out of Australia, then had to go to Bahrain before going to take off his captaincy at Nottinghamshire, played 2 warm-up games, and then at that point, just before the first game of the T20 Blast, he was recalled to Australia to quarantine for 2 weeks, join the camp, and go to the Caribbean. So there is one man who is certainly not taking playing for Australia for granted, and I'm not saying that the others do, but he is clearly hungry, and I guess that's the kind of passion that I think John Buchanan thinks, from what he said, should be rewarded.
I agree. It should come into account when someone's going, like, moving all heaven and earth to try and play for Australia, and you've got other players not. It is something that naturally, even if they don't want to, coaches are going to have to consider at the end of the day.
I don't think they will, to be honest. I think,
really?
Winning the World Cup is winning the World Cup. And I actually just think that they will pick whatever team they think is going to win it. What do you say, Richie?
What a ripper. I think he's a bit stuck on repeat today. That's a shame, but look.
Richie agrees with me.
Yes.
Okay, third up, well, no such problems with hunger when it comes to Australia's women, when it comes to playing. Meg Lanning has spoken this week. A bunch of the Australian players, and Matthew Mott, pulled out of the 100. Which was going to be held in July and August because of the confirmation of that multi-format series against India, which starts in September. But one of the things that Meg, she's spoken a lot about wanting to play more tests, but the push now, I think, is starting to get stronger from from a player point of view when it comes to maybe having 5-day tests rather than 4, and actually having some red ball cricket, because you've got to remember when the women go out and play test cricket, they're essentially learning on the job. They don't play it domestically, which is a pretty difficult proposition, especially when there's so much pressure put on them to get a result, be entertaining, play good cricket, and by the way, learn how to do all that stuff at the same time.
Yeah, I certainly agree. Look, out of the two, I personally think the domestic red ball cricket is probably more important, kind of for the reasons you were saying there, that we just need to kind of build up that match experience with the red ball for our female cricketers here, because they don't get that experience. And while I think eventually that push to 5-day test cricket will be important, especially considering some of the pitches and some of the past matches we've seen, hopefully what we'll see in the upcoming 2 tests here in Australia with a nice fresh pitch at the Wacker, at Manuka Oval, which I think are 2 really strong bowling wickets when they want to be, and when bowlers use the conditions well, that 4 days will probably be enough for those test matches. And as a result, I think that discussion might get pushed down the path a little bit, but when it comes to domestic red ball cricket, I think it's an absolute must. I mean, the players, you talk to any of the female players, not just here in Australia, I'm sure internationally, but their desire to just play more red cricket and get more exposure to it is so strong. They see it so much in the male game, the men's game, and just there's no real reason, I guess, besides kind of the financial side of things in previous years, that we haven't really established a female domestic competition for red ball cricket, and I think it's about time that we do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. Funnily enough, the 5-day cricket, the Test cricket, is actually the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
As far as administrators are concerned, as opposed to the domestic comp. It is tricky to find the time, to find the money, and I understand that. And T20 has been seen as the vehicle by administrators around the world for developing and promoting women's cricket. So that would have to be overcome. I do think it will happen eventually. I think there's more of an appetite now for Test cricket, and that will feed into that. It's just a question of when. And I think Australia will be will lead the charge. There has been, some red ball cricket played in certain times, but it'll happen, but I don't know when.
Richie agrees. Richie is all for more women's red ball cricket.
Why wouldn't he be? He's a sensible man. Next up, speaking of women, India have fought back, winning the third ODI in that multi-format series against England. Really interesting, this one, because Mitali Raj, again, half century, she was undefeated on 75. They were chasing 219. They got there with 4 wickets to spare, India. She played a similar kind of innings, sort of what she does, but in the previous game, India lost, but in this game they were able to chase it down. And I think maybe that says something more about, perhaps about the way women's one-day cricket is changing, because those scores of around 200, 220, they probably would have won a lot of games. Now that's considered a low score. So whether or not Mitali Raj is able to up that tempo and up that pace, hard to criticise her when she's top scoring, but it just shows the difference that the game situation can make for the way that she paces her innings.
I think it certainly is, and I think it's almost just a problem for cricket more generally, that because of the shortened length of these games, that we're wanting to consume things quicker, people are just expecting strike rates to be in the hundreds, 120s all the time, whereas it's not always going to be that way when it comes to cricket, because you've got to take into account the conditions, the type of bowlers you're facing. I mean, drawing parallels to some male cricket recently, David Warner kind of got dropped from Sunrisers Hyderabad because he wasn't scoring enough. He got dropped as captain. Baba Azam, also in the Pakistan Super League, came under criticism as well for a couple of games where he kind of carried his bat, but his team still lost. So yeah, it's one of those things with cricket where I think there'll always be people, when you look at it, you go, okay, you could have scored at a higher rate, but weighing up the importance of staying in and keeping your wicket alive. For me, I'm okay with what Raj did, and I think it's something that kind of shows sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. That's kind of just cricket.
Yeah, and also another great cameo from Sneh Rana, who of course was in that amazing partnership in the test that saved that test that ended in a draw for India. Playing on this tour, she has been an absolute revelation. She scored 24 off 22, so a lovely little cameo from her. And I think she's turning out to be the real revelation. We knew about Shafali Verma, but I think Sneh Rana has been absolutely outstanding for India.
Oh, I totally agree, and I think that it's kind of showing that while it's taken them a while to kind of find their feet in this tour, that they've got the squad to really challenge the likes of England. I think they definitely challenged New Zealand as well in a longer form series, and I think eventually they'll be able to find their feet so much that they will be challenging Australia in a longer form series, which luckily enough we get to see in just a few months' time now. I
know it's getting closer. I'm really excited about that. It's great for India that they're actually having this pretty tough warm-up ahead of that series as well.
Oh, Richie. What a ripper.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And finally, we can't let a timed out show go by without mentioning the feats of the great Jimmy Anderson, finally getting that 1,000th first class wicket. Haino Kuhn was his victim, his 1,000th victim as Lancashire took on Kent. He figures of 7 for 19 in 10 overs. Absolutely ridiculous. The rain had been affecting the game. He wasted absolutely no time in picking up those wickets. And what I love is that he got Haino Kuhn out with an outswinger that just caught the edge, which is vintage Jimmy. And just nice to see him in a way. You know, it's always nice to see first-class wickets in Test cricket, but nice to see him do it for Lancashire as well, because he's a very proud Lancastrian.
If you close your eyes and went, imagine a Jimmy Anderson wicket, it would be that outswinger that just catches the feather of the edge. I mean, it was fantastic. I have a bone to pick with Darren Stevens. His couple of boundaries meant that Jimmy Anderson's figures went into the double figures, which I was not happy about at all. I was hoping that we'd get a 7 for 3 or a 7 for 4 there at some point, because his figures were looking absolutely remarkable. But, I mean, Darren Stevens, the other big story of this county season, kind of ruined those figures for me, and I'm sure other statisticians who are watching the game. But yeah, I think it's hard to look past Jimmy Anderson and just how good he's been for so long. I mean, you go back to those days where touring Australia and being part of the English setup with those blonde tips in his hair, who would have thought he'd go on to have the career that he has had like this? I mean, there are still people who underestimate him, still people who don't rate him highly, and I think we were saying before, it's just bizarre because you look at his record and it just speaks for itself.
Yeah, like the criticisms that, you know, calling him Clouderson and, you know, he only takes... I mean, he thrives in those conditions because they suit him. It's the same as most bowlers do, and he's had one or two sort of poor tours, really, but he helped them, was very key in their series win in India, and he just has become a better bowler as he goes, and I think longevity is a part of being great too. The fact that he's been able to last as long as he does, and he's just become a smarter bowler, I think, with each season. And to see him do it, and Dan Christian and Jimmy Anderson, let's hear it for the old boys. They're old guys win stuff, as Dan Christian says.
Exactly. And I think for me personally, I love seeing that we've got a real new emergence of young British and English bowlers now. I mean, throw in some from other countries for the England cricket team like we usually do, but mainly the English bowlers as well. I know, I had to get that in ahead of the Ashes, but yeah, there's some really exciting young English bowlers coming through, and I think he's playing a big role in that, really mentoring them through that process of their introduction into international cricket, along with Stuart Broad. I think that in the coming years, it's going to be a great cricket attack from England.
Oh, what a ripper!
And that is absolutely appropriate for Jimmy Anderson as well, because he is an absolute ripper. Yeah, well done. Again, you've managed to keep your job for another week, but pressure's on now because I'm not quite sure how you're going to top the great Richie Benolocki.
Maybe I'll have to record myself. I'll just back myself in.
Okay, then you're really getting the sack. That's it. That is a come down. No, I'm joking, of course. You're not. It's not really a come down. Yes, it is. That is it for Timed Out this week. We're going to be keeping a very keen eye on things over in St Lucia. Wish I was keeping an eye on them in person, but instead we'll be doing it from our lounge rooms, rugged up against the winter cold. And whatever you're doing this week as far as cricket goes, I hope you enjoy watching it. And we will see you here next week. Make sure you keep an eye out on sportingnews.com for all the articles that we'll be posting throughout the week and videos as well. We'll see you next week.